This video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions, and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha, one of your favorite channels on YouTube. I'm back at you this week with another terrific video story, and you can see the title right on your screen. My sister-in-law walked in on my cheating wife and brother. I filed for divorce and went no contact. However, so let's get into this story and see what's going on. And he starts out, he says, 2 weeks ago yesterday, my sister-in-law returned home early from work and caught my wife and brother, her husband, in their bed. She took pictures, kicked them out, then immediately called me while I was working. When I answered, she was screaming, and I couldn't make out what she was saying. After she calmed down, she explained what happened, and I, of course, was in complete disbelief. My wife and I were happily married and just welcomed our first child 19 months prior, while my brother and I have always been super close our entire lives. At first, I was in denial, and I told my sister-in-law it can't be true. Then she sent me photos of them standing partially clothed beside the bed, and the gravity of the situation set in. Since then, I've not seen or spoken a single word to either of them. This has caused a major rift in my family, and now I'm being blamed for causing the cheaters mental anguish and for breaking up 2 marriages. Before I go any further, let me give you a little background about us. I'm 28 and my soon-to-be ex is 27. We've been married 3 years and have a toddler-age daughter. My brother is 37 and my sister-in-law is 38. They've been married for 16 years and have 2 sons, ages 15 and 14. My parents are both in their mid-60s and retired, and my wife's parents are both 52. All the people I've identified here are key players in this drama. Being so much older than me, I've always looked up to my brother. Growing up, he was not only my brother, but my idol and confidant. To be honest, I viewed him to be more of a parent figure than either my mom or dad. We were each other's best man and godparents to each other's children. My brother didn't go to college and instead had worked at the same manufacturing facility for 19 years until he was permanently laid off in 2021. Since then, he's been trying to find another job of equal pay but hasn't been successful. He's been offered lower wage jobs, but out of pride, he refuses to work for less. As a result of being out of work, he became depressed and withdrawn. He'd been working since he was in high school and moved out on his own at 18, so not being able to support his family has been a blow to his pride. His depression got so bad he was put on a prescription and has been seeing a therapist. His demeanor had been improving prior to D-Day, but now it's cratered. Like my brother, my wife was diagnosed with depression shortly after the birth of our daughter. She too has been seeing a therapist, and my mother and mother-in-law were spending time with her every day to help her do things, often taking our daughter so that she could have alone time or so she could get things done. It was on one of those days when my mother-in-law had my daughter that my wife and brother hooked up. I had another story, I think 6 or 7 months ago, that was very similar, where the wife cheated, and while she was cheating, her mother or her mother-in-law was watching the baby. That is just totally disgusting. Like I said, I've not spoken to my wife or brother since then, and I never plan to. I've already secured an attorney and started the divorce process. My sister-in-law has done the same, and we've been in constant communication with each other since D-Day. This is where the family rift comes in. At first, my parents supported my sister-in-law and I, as we are the victims in this whole thing, along with our kids. However, after they found out we were both planning on divorcing our spouses, they have turned on us and are now making us out to be the villains. It's mostly my mom driving this narrative, as my dad just goes along with whatever she says. I love the guy, but he is a big bowl of jello when it comes to dealing with my mom or dealing with any difficult issue, actually. He defers to her on everything. I think we all probably have met someone like this, either someone in our family or a friend's father or, an acquaintance's father that's just a milquetoast type of guy, just weak and just goes along with whatever his wife says, doesn't have any backbone. I mean, I don't know how individuals like that can get through life. It just amazes me that they can. Like my parents, my soon to be ex's parents were initially on my side, but have since turned on me and are now talking me down. Thankfully for my sister in law, her parents totally support her, and she and my nephews have been living with them ever since. My wife and brother claim their depression is the only reason they cheated, swearing that it was just the one time and they completely regretted it even before they were caught. Oh, come on. Now, what do you mean by that? They completely regretted it before they were caught and they claimed that was their first time and they were caught in the act? How could you completely regret it if you were caught doing it? That is just crazy. They claim to have not spoken since D-Day, but my sister-in-law and I do not believe it. Well, I don't believe it either. Things have become so toxic with my parents that I've stopped speaking with them as well, as all they do is criticize me for not forgiving my brother and wife. They feel my reaction has caused my sister-in-law to react the same, and therefore I'm the one who's responsible for breaking up our family, not my wife and brother. So many of these stories, you'll see that all the onus seems to be put on the betrayed spouse or the betrayed partner, like he or she's the bad guy in this thing, when really they're the victims. My mother actually told me this. This is nonsense, of course, as my sister-in-law has told her multiple times that she would be divorcing my brother regardless of my reaction. One person who has been steadfastly on my side since the beginning has been my aunt, my dad's sister. She's really PO'd over the whole thing. She's cut all contact with my brother and excoriates my parents every time she talks to them. Well, your aunt sounds strong and bold. She sounds like the complete opposite of your father, who is just a weakling. She's also been handling the pickups and drop-offs of my daughter with my wife's parents, which has enabled me to keep away from my wife. My aunt and sister-in-law are the only family members I'm now in touch with, and only they know where I've been staying. Since D-Day, I've been staying at an efficiency-style hotel. It's pretty nice, and I plan to stay living here until I get a new place of my own. I could move back to our apartment since my wife has been staying with her parents, but I don't want to go back there. There's just too much history and memories back there, and I don't want to risk running into my wife. I did go back once to retrieve my game console and clothes, but haven't been back since. I plan on canceling the lease when it comes up for renewal at the end of next month. Recently, I shared what happened with two of my closest friends. While they're completely on my side, they both told me I should meet with my wife and brother to bring closure to the matter. They said it's going to happen eventually, so I should just get it over with now. They also told me at some point I'll need to forgive them and move past this in order to move on. If not, I'll be consumed with anger and hate. I disagree with them, as the way I view it, the wife and brother I once had no longer exist. They were replaced with two strangers who I don't even recognize and want nothing to do with. My sister-in-law still talks to my brother, but only about matters regarding their sons. By the way, my nephews want nothing to do with their father now, which has driven him into an even deeper depression. As a result, he started drinking daily and rarely leaves my parents' house. He's been staying there ever since my sister-in-law threw him out. As I stated previously, my mom blames me for his accelerated mental decline. Initially, she demanded that I talk to him, but now she has resorted to leaving me teary messages begging me to just talk to him, as she and my dad are fearful he's not going to make it. Hearing my mom cry like that makes me doubt my stance for the first time. While I'll never forgive and reconcile with my brother, should I at least meet with him to possibly improve his mental state? I don't want to, but perhaps that might be the right thing to do under the circumstances. Let me know what you think. So that's the end of his original post. And now we're going to take a look at a few responses he got from the community. But before we do that, I want to remind you, if you've liked what you've heard so far, make sure to hit that like button right now. That will help get this video out and seen by people all over the world. Now, let's take a look at some of those responses. The first one is from a woman. She says, "The level of betrayal you must feel is unimaginable, yet you seem so strong. Be sure to take care of your mental health as you navigate the divorce process. You are right to cut your brother out of your life and to limit all contact with your wife to matters pertaining to your daughter. As for your parents, I would have a sit down with your mother and tell her if she doesn't knock it off, you'll completely cut her off too." Well, this woman had some very good advice for him. Next, here's a response from a guy. He says, "Your brother and wife are complete garbage humans. The kind of people who do stuff like this are the lowest of the low and are beyond redemption. I must also add that your mother falls into the same category. The three of them are selfish narcissists, and you need to get as far away from them as possible. As for your father, he's a useless, weak man and is the reason why your brother and mother are as dysfunctional as they are." Next, here's another response from a woman. She says, "If your wife has postpartum depression, it can cause her to do extreme things she normally wouldn't do. I experienced this after the birth of my second child, and while I didn't cheat, it caused me to have many harmful thoughts and behaviors. I believe if you are willing to stick by your wife and work through this, I think you could have a successful marriage going forward." So this woman is saying, hey, give your wife another chance because of the depression she had. And listen, I know depression is a serious thing and it definitely has an impact on people, but it's not an excuse to cheat. I had another story like this where somebody I think had depression and the same excuse was brought forward. Oh, you've got to kind of discount that, you got to kind of put that aside because they're not the same person when they're going through depression. If it were me, I couldn't forgive it, okay? To me, that's no excuse for cheating. And finally, we've got another response from a guy. He says, "First things first, you need to DNA test your daughter. How do you know they haven't been hooking up all along?" Well, that's a good point. Second, from the way you describe the relationship between your parents and the way your mother has reacted to the situation, I'd be willing to make a sizable bet that she is a cheater herself. From my experience, cheaters cover for cheaters. If I were you, I'd go no contact with them all and move as far away as possible. So that's a sampling of some of the responses he got. And now he comes back with a series of updates. The first one came 33 days later. He says, "This is an update to my original post from last month. I want to thank everyone who replied. It took some time, but I think I've read every one of your replies and responded to many of you. If you didn't get a response from me, that doesn't mean I didn't read your reply. I assure you I did. The overwhelming majority of you felt that I am doing the right thing by cutting contact with my wife and brother and proceeding with my plans for divorce. Since we have a daughter together, I'll always have a connection to my soon-to-be ex for a while. But to keep things at arm's length, I started using a co-parenting app recommended by my attorney for discussing matters pertaining to our daughter. Regarding the divorce, my attorney wants me to go in hard and seek full custody using my wife's depression diagnosis as the basis. I'm unsure at this point if I want to do that, as I think it will destroy her psychologically, and I need her to be a strong, loving mother to our daughter. My attorney told me that as a father, I need to use every leverage point I have as the cards are stacked against me. She said we'll have one shot to make an impression with the judge and need to put our best argument forward to ensure success. I told her I'd think about it, but I don't know. Here's another OP that's not listening to his attorney. If you've got a good attorney, they know the ropes, so you need to listen to them, especially when it comes to matters of your finances and custody of your children. Since D-Day, my wife has been sending me messages daily, saying how sorry she is and promising me the world if I would just give her another chance to prove herself. Well, I think she's already proven herself. I've not yet responded to any of her messages, and I don't plan to. She's tried asking me questions about our daughter through text, but I've ignored those too. Eventually, she sends them through the co parenting app, and then I respond. This way, all of our correspondence can be tracked and stored. In her last pitch to me, she suggested we could move away to another state, possibly Texas, Florida, or Arizona, and make a fresh start. She said her parents are willing to pay for our move and give us $25,000 to get on our feet somewhere new. So obviously, her parents are in desperation mode. They know that the OP is a good guy, he's a good provider, he's a great husband and father, and they don't want to lose that. They know if he divorces her, then they're going to have a daughter who is a single MOM, living out on her own and raising a child, and it's going to be more difficult for her to find another partner, and who knows if the next partner she finds is going to be a good guy. So that's what they're probably thinking. She said getting away from our families and all the bad things that happen will enable us to rekindle what we once had. No, you're never going to be able to rekindle that after what you did. The whole thing is so ridiculous and shows how pitiful she's become. All I want at this point is an uncontested divorce and a good co-parenting relationship with her. Nothing more. Things with my brother and sister-in-law are about the same. She's moving forward with the divorce and his mental condition is getting worse. As for my parents, I'm only communicating with my mom via text message at this point. Nothing with my dad, as I'm sure he's just sitting on the couch watching TV, totally tuned out as always. My aunt and sister-in-law have been my rocks, and we communicate daily. So you can see how the original poster here feels about his father. He just views his father as just a bump on a log. He's just a weak guy. Meanwhile, his aunt is the strong leader type in the family. Unbelievable. I mean, it's amazing, like I said before, how some guys can get through life like that. They are both angels from heaven, and I appreciate them more and more every day. That's all I'll say now about my family, though I have much more I could share. So obviously there's a backstory here with his parents, I'm thinking. One last thing before I go. I did get a DNA test and everything turned out okay. Thank God for that. Now I'm assuming what he means it turned out okay is that he is the biological father of his daughter. To those of you that suggested I do so, thank you. The thought never crossed my mind. Are you kidding me? That's the first thing that came to my mind as soon as I started reading this story. So that's the end of his first update, and then he comes back 64 days later with another update. He says a lot has transpired since I last updated, so I thought I'd come back and let you know what's happened. A few days after my last update, my soon-to-be ex sent me a text stating how depressed she was. She said she didn't want to go on with life anymore and even said some more poignant things along those lines, indicating to me she wasn't mentally well. I immediately alerted her parents and they rushed home to make sure she was all right. Thankfully, she didn't do anything to herself, but they did end up taking her to the hospital for evaluation. She was admitted and stayed in there for 3 days and her medication was changed. Shortly after this, my brother made similar comments to my sister-in-law and she contacted my parents to intervene. He refused to go to the hospital and swore he didn't mean it, but they've been on pins and needles with him ever since. My mom sent me a text after this happened, saying I could end all this by just talking with my brother and soon-to-be ex. She said it was time for me to step up and be a man. I mean, this mother is unbelievable. Needless to say, I didn't respond, and her reaction has only hardened my stance to remain low contact with her. Well, you know what? The way she's acting and the way she has acted, I would go no contact with her. I reported what happened with my wife and brother to my attorney, and she insisted I immediately file for legal separation and go for full custody. After thinking it through for a few days, I decided to take her advice. Thankfully, it's about time. Long story short, the legal separation was approved de facto, and I temporarily got full custody of my daughter until my wife's mental state improves, which will be evaluated every 3 months. So what I'm assuming he's meaning here by de facto is that they filed the separation papers and his wife didn't respond, and therefore he was given some sort of de facto judgment. He goes on, he says, her entire family hates me now and views me as some sort of demon. I've explained to them I only did this for the safety of my daughter and will gladly share custody when my wife gets well, but they don't care. Her parents claim there's always been someone with her since we split, and that my wife has always been a great mother to our daughter, even during her lowest points. My mother, of course, joined the chorus telling my sister-in-law that I was just being petty. My aunt and her daughter, my cousin, have been watching my daughter while I'm at work. They love her and she loves them. My aunt and cousin also regularly take my daughter over to see my soon-to-be ex so that she sees her at least 4 to 5 times per week for hours at a time. Well, that's very nice. I mean, that's something he doesn't have to do. I think he's going above and beyond for her. I've made it clear to my soon-to-be ex through messages I've sent via the app that I want her to get well and for us to share custody once the divorce is final. While she continues to try to get me to take her back, I think it's finally setting in that I'm not going to change my mind, and the best outcome is that we evolve to being great co-parents. My brother seems to be moving on with his life as well. According to my sister-in-law, he got a job a few weeks ago as an assistant manager in training at a store that rents tools and equipment. She said he too has accepted that she's not giving an inch and he needs to get used to the new reality. She said my nephews still want nothing to do with him and she's not pushing them. Their divorce hearing has already been set, so their divorce should be final by the end of the year. One final thing, I moved into a new apartment a month after I last posted. It's got 2 bedrooms and is located just 10 minutes from my office. It's also just 5 minutes away from my aunt's house, but it's nearly 20 minutes from both my parents' and my soon-to-be ex's parents' house. The added distance has minimized the drama somewhat, but not completely. So that's the end of his second update, and now he comes back with his final update 8 months later. He says, well, it's all over but the singing, or the crying, or however the saying goes. I'm not divorced yet, but the hearing is all set for the 1st of next month. My attorney has been working with my soon-to-be ex's attorney, and we've agreed on custody and a split of our assets, which weren't much, just furniture and a small savings account. I agreed to give my wife all of our old furniture, which I already had moved into her parents' garage months ago after I canceled the lease. My soon-to-be ex also recently got a job as a receptionist at an office complex. Even so, my attorney warned me I'll likely be paying her child support for the next 17 years and possibly alimony for up to a year, but that's something the judge will have to decide. As for my brother and sister-in-law, they are divorced. My sister-in-law kept the house and they split everything else. She's happy now, and my nephews recently met with their father for the first time since this all went down. While things for them are not back to normal and never will be, they at least have reopened lines of communication now. As for my relationship with my parents, we're back on speaking terms, but I've established clear boundaries regarding our relationship, and so far my mom's been good about it. I still have to warn her every once in a while to knock it off when she brings up my brother and how she'd like us to make up. I told her that's never going to happen and to just save her energy for something else. As for my daughter, she's becoming a big girl now and is talking like a lawyer. She's hilarious and I could listen to her babble on for hours. My aunt and cousin still watch her when I'm working, and my parents often stop over on those days to spend time with her. That's cool, as I want her to have a good relationship with her grandparents. As for my wife's parents, they still view me as persona non grata, or the devil reincarnate. They feel I've totally overreacted and could have salvaged our marriage. Can you imagine that? His wife, their daughter, was cheating on him with his brother, and they say he overreacted. Are you kidding me? Come on. Perhaps they are right, but who wants a relationship that's been salvaged? If I do ever marry again, and that's a big if, it will be with someone totally new. So that's the end of his story. And overall, I think he handled this as well as could be expected. He cut his brother off, and I would have nothing ever to do with my brother again after what he did. He also cut his wife off and divorced her. Now he's going to have to communicate with her for probably the next 17, 18, 20 years because they've got the daughter together. And he's doing it through an app. So I think, that's being handled perfectly there. The one thing he didn't do is he didn't take the advice of his attorney up front, which he should have done, but he did, end up finally doing that, and everything turned out, I think, very well for him. He's a young guy. He's in his mid-20s. Looks like he's got a good career going. His options going forward in his future are going to be very bright, I'm sure. So now let's take a look at some of what I think are the morals of this story. The first one, make surprise visits part of your routine. Be unpredictable. How many of these stories have you listened to here on YouTube or read about where the guy comes home or returns from a trip early and finds his wife or his girlfriend cheating? Just something to think about. Next, depression is real and can make people do drastic things. However, it is not an excuse for cheating. Next, no contact is the best way of dealing with a cheater and dealing with anybody who has betrayed you. You see how it played out in this story again. This guy cut his brother and wife off, and you can see how he took control of the situation by doing so. Next, weak men are terrible influences on their children. You can see that clearly illustrated in this story by this man's father. He was totally spineless, a totally weak guy, let his wife run the household. She's very outspoken, she's obnoxious, and he just sits back and just takes it all. And that is a terrible influence, especially on sons, but even on daughters. I mean, when you have a weak man running the household, and not even running the household, he's just there, probably just providing, it is a terrible influence on the entire family. Next, minimize or remove toxic people from your life, including family. Now, I know that's easier said than done, especially with direct family. But you've got to do that, or those individuals are going to monopolize and be a toxic influence on your life. Next, always do what's best for you and your children. So many times, like I said on the last story, these guys that get in this situation, they're thinking about everyone else except for themselves. They've got to look out for the well-being of themselves and their children. That is paramount. Then everybody else comes after that. Next, get a good attorney and take their advice. This guy eventually did come around to what his attorney was suggesting he do, but he should have done that right up front. And then finally, as I always say with these stories, after cheating has occurred, go your separate ways and move on with the next phase of your life. So those are my thoughts, and now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story, and how do you think the OP handled the situation? Would you have handled it like he did, or would you have done something completely different? Tell us about it in the comments. Also, be sure to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to this channel, and I will talk to you